One. Hey, everybody, welcome to Green Rush. We're here this Friday. I'm doing the kickoff.
I was I'm totally confused because it's Friday. I don't know what computer's running this show. I don't know who's running this show. I just know we're doing a show.
We're
Jimmy
doing
Young.
a show.
Who are you?
I'm David Rabinovitz, apparently run at the beginning of the show this week, and we are joined with one of our favorite guests, Morgan Fox of the NCIA.
Hello again, guys.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing really well.
Good. Is everything under control in Washington, D.C.? Because it's been normally quiet this week. Am I wrong?
I mean, when is it ever?
Right.
But in terms of cannabis, I think that, we're kind of stuck in a wait and see pattern, both waiting on the reintroduction of the Schumer bill the introduction of the Schumer bill in the Senate, which all the sponsors keep saying will happen, quote, very soon, which has been stretching on and on and on. Everybody's waiting with bated breath. We are looking at the reintroduction of the MORE Act in the House early next week. So that's really exciting. And, we can't wait to see what the actual language of that bill is. We think that there will be some changes from the version that the House passed in December. The only changes that we know of really for certain are that an amendment that would have allowed federal regulators and license authorities to basically deny federal business licenses to people who had state level felonies of any sort will be removed, which is excellent because that really flies in the face of the purported social justice bent of this particular bill. But also, we're hearing that there might be a change to the provision related to Small Business Administration loans that will actually expand the scope from what was passed by the House last year to basically mean that people who have been most impacted by the war on drugs, as well as women and people of color, will have a special consideration for SBA loans for any type of business they want to open, not just cannabis businesses.
Oh, that's good news. I think anything that they could do to actually infuse interest loaning from banks is a good thing in any business. So let me ask you a question: how this works? The MORE Act exists. You talk about amendments to that act and I believe it was then Senator Kamala Harris who was involved with the MORE Act, wasn't she?
The lead sponsor taking over the office of the vice presidency.
There you go. So chances are she might actually get a little involved with this, or because she's vice president, they don't get her involved unless there is a 50-50 split in the Senate and she has to come in and make the deciding vote.
Well, in terms of being a tiebreaker in the Senate, she'll absolutely be involved. But behind the scenes, I'm pretty confident that she's going to be nudging Biden to at least not obstruct any of the descheduling legislation that might come across his desk, as well as incremental legislation, if that happens to pass through Congress before a larger and more comprehensive bill. But there are going to be really interesting politics in play. That the MORE Act is going to be a real easy lift in, but I don't know if it was to move immediately. And I think that the House is going to wait until they can see what Chuck Schumer's bill looks like in the Senate, can really get a better feel for what sort of negotiations they're going to have to do, both with the House as well as the Senate, once, fingers crossed, both chambers pass descheduling bills. But either way, the votes are clearly there. I mean, they were there last December, and I think that we're only getting more Republican support this year. Weird partisan politics aside, depending on how McCarthy and McConnell crack the whip. But really, I think that we're in a really good position now to be able to debate some of the details about what a good descheduling and regulation bill looks like. Unfortunately, to my knowledge, nobody has really seen what or at least among the activist community, has really seen what the new and improved MORE Act is going to look like beyond what we saw passed already and beyond what we've heard about those two items that I mentioned earlier. There could be more. We're really hoping to see a robust regulatory structure included in the new improved well, but And I think we're going to have to wait until Tuesday to find out whether or not that's the case. And if no regulatory structure, we're going to be pushing for one very strongly, as well as trying to push for continuation or improvement upon any of the restorative justice provisions that exist in that bill.
Right. When you talk about amendments and regulatory, are we going to see a real workforce development program? In other words, something that is in this law that not only gives those who've been most impacted by the war on drugs an opportunity to get into business, but also learn the business and to actually learn how to run a business. And that's something I know David is very active in.
I'd love to see it. I tend to think that those sort of things will be dealt with at the state level much more than the federal level. I would love to see funding provided at the federal level for such programs at the state level. Right. Similarly, with expungement, the vast majority of arrests and prosecutions and convictions for cannabis take place at the state level. It's a non-zero and not insignificant amount of people that are facing or have been convicted of federal charges. But it pales in comparison to the state level. So even though we might be talking about expunging federal charges and working on some sort of federal programs in terms of public education and job training and things like that, what I would like to see is money specifically set to filter down into the state programs, particularly when it comes to it, because some states have been able to just green light this and move forward with expungements. Illinois has been a great example of that, and some districts in California. Other states are either dragging their feet or they really have the resources to be able to just do it for free for everybody. And I know personally, in states like Ohio, it can cost thousands of dollars to get your records expunged, and that's not something that a lot of people can do. So to fund those sort of efforts at the federal level, providing funds to trickle down to the state level would be really, really useful. We'll see exactly what that looks like, hopefully next week.
And when you say no one amongst the lobbyists and the activists actually have a chance to see the final draft of these things, who do they share it with internally? Or is it really well kept secret amongst the elected officials, as they say?
Well, I mean, at least, and I'm not in these meetings on a day-to-day basis. That's more of our government relations team. But from what I understand from being on the Hill for closing in on 15 years now, that lawmakers and their offices will reach out to stakeholders a lot for input, and very rarely will they share what they're doing with that input. It does happen. But quite often what you get is sort of a very one-way street right up until the actual language is finalized, and then it starts to become a little bit more two-way.
So there's hope on the horizon as we enter the weekend, and then next weekend, and America's opening up now a little bit. People are double vaccinated. I think something like 60% of Americans right now, which is certainly trending in the right direction. Getting back to business as usual in Washington, D.C., is this a good thing for the is this a good thing for the cannabis advocacy movement? Because really and truly, that's what most people want to know. It's like, when is cannabis going to be legalized in this country, or at least decriminalized? That's what that's the number one trending question in the SEO world, by the way.
Well, I mean, to be completely honest, I think it's impossible to really predict exactly what's going to happen. I mean, outside of cannabis, there are numerous important world issues and domestic issues happening that Congress and the administration have to deal with. And as we've discussed, the show that support for cannabis policy reform is very broad but pretty shallow. It usually does not rise to a high priority level for a lot of people, even though, especially if you're looking at criminal justice reforms, it's not necessarily something that is going to have massive impact compared to things like sentencing reform or getting rid of mandatory minimums. But it is sort of a cornerstone of our failed criminal justice system that is going to have to be addressed, and it's one that can be fairly easily addressed. Really, the question is how it gets prioritized by Congress. What I'm seeing right now is sort of picking up where we left off in 2020 in terms of momentum. We started out the beginning of 2020 seeing pretty big hearings about cannabis policy reform in January. And then, we started seeing more movement for bills, and then the pandemic hit. So we didn't really see any progress on cannabis bills until December. Well past the election, past a lot of politically sensitive times and politically sensitive issues. So now in 2021, that pace is starting to pick back up again, and I expect that to continue. But again, a lot of things can happen, and cannabis isn't the only issue that Congress is dealing with.
Absolutely not. David, you got a question for Mr. Bergen here?
Well, not just yet, Jimmy, because my question, I'm going to ask him if he has any thoughts on this whole Delta 8 controversy.
Oh, yeah, that's an interesting one. I don't know how much controversial it is. A lot of states are banning Delta 8 THC.
Right.
Well, I think that bans are probably the wrong way to go. I mean, we've seen that prohibition doesn't work. However, there's really not too much research at all about what the substance does. It's only found in very, very minuscule amounts in the plant naturally. And this is really the first time in human history that it's been synthesized from existing cannabinoids and consumed by humans in greater concentrations and larger amounts. So we really don't exactly know what it does to people, short term, long term. A lot of the anecdotal evidence suggests that at least the inebriating or psychoactive effects are similar to Delta 9 THC, but without some of the paranoia. I don't really know what it does to the human body really at all. When you add that to the fact that I've talked to a lot of people who have been testing Delta 8 samples from around the country, and almost all of them come up with massive amounts of impurities and unknown concentrations of substances. It really presents a lot of really sticky issues. Plus, add that to the fact that it's not regulated at all. So, I mean, somebody could be in a basement laboratory and selling it on the internet to people that are under the age of 18. It presents a lot of problematic things that could, not only harm consumers, but also could set the movement to legalize cannabis back by years if there turn out to be negative health impacts. So our position is that Delta 8 should be regulated the same way that Delta 9 is under various state laws, as well as under federal laws, such as the Farm Bill, until we know more about it. And, that is probably problematic for a lot of businesses that, have been unable to sell their massive stockpiles of CBD because the FDA has been unwilling to actually get off their butts and regulate the substance, and are realizing that they can convert CBD into Delta 8 and be able to actually salvage some of their crop produce. It's very problematic, and it's very tight line to walk. But the bottom line is you really have to look out for consumer safety, and we just don't know enough about this at all. But once again, this comes down to problems associated with prohibition.
Right.
The fact that the FDA has not been able to effectively regulate CBD yet, especially in terms of food additives and things like that, means that people are sitting on stockpiles and they don't know what to do with it. The fact that the vast majority of states in this country still do not regulate or have legal access to Delta 9 THC means that people in states like Texas or Indiana or Idaho who don't have legal access to Delta 9 THC products are looking for a supposedly legal and readily available alternative. Unfortunately, it's one that people don't know a whole lot about. And this sort of is the same sort of thing that we with like spice and K2 and other synthetic cannabinoids. The DEA had sort of an analog system set up where, when you make something illegal, innovative and resourceful chemists and scientists and breeders will come up with an alternative. And then the DEA will ban that and make that Schedule 1. And then they have to tweak those molecules a little bit. And every time you tweak it, it's turning into something else that nobody really has any knowledge of what the effects are on the human body. So it really creates a nasty catch-22 that could be completely solved by making cannabis legal.
It certainly could. And, while we sit here and think that this is rational thinking, okay, keep in mind that the plant actually grows a lot faster than bureaucracy moves, right? I mean, that's true, right? Research continues to be stalled because of its classification. They're doing everything, they being those in charge, let's just leave it at that, are doing everything they can to slow down the progress so that they get it right, or more importantly, actually have to learn about it more so they can learn more and actually get it right when they finally come out with this. I don't have as much confidence that the people that are sitting in these positions now, government, actually care that much about it. So I don't pass on it anyway. That being said, I look at my and I thank God it's Friday, and I thank God that we're only a few minutes away from 420. Okay, because that's when we take our break, Morgan, and it also allows me to pontificate a little bit about why I'm wearing this T-shirt. Now, true story, and then there's a convenient story about this. I happened to get this T-shirt in the mail today out of the blue from some friends involved with the Student Television Network, which is a great organization for high school students. They go every year to a convention and they show their best stuff. And obviously the theme of this year's convention that was virtual was Tell the Story. And doesn't that remind you of something, David? What else is about telling the story that's involved with the green rush? I'm setting you up for this, David.
You're the new Green Rush promotion on Tell the Story.
That's right.
Tell us, Jimmy.
And you could win with your story. This is a really cool cannabis storage device. And we're going to be soliciting people's stories on text or via video. And you could win one of the storage units. Notice it's missing one. I know where that is. And this one here is the bottom of it, and it's all like great aluminum canisters, so it's very, very light and also very sturdy, smell proof and child proof, perhaps the most important thing too. As it turns out, Morgan, I'm going to hope you on just a minute. We actually got 2 stories submitted already this week. We announced it last Friday. We've got a couple of stories. We're going to urge people again to go to procannabismedia.com's website and enter your story. Tell us your story because I can actually read it on the air and you might win a prize or you might win a T-shirt or you actually might be invited on this show to tell your story and to talk more about cannabis. And I'm going to tell you 2 stories. Is that okay? Morgan, can you hang out for just a couple more minutes?
I can hang out for a couple minutes. I'm going to wait to share my story again until maybe the next time, but or submit it through the official channels.
Well, and by the way, even though you are affiliated with Pro Cannabis Media, you are not part of the family because you're here to promote what you do. You're the communications director of the NCIA. All you're doing is doing your job. That being said, I'm not going to mention last name, but Cody has cerebral palsy. This was the first one that came in. I use cannabis to help with my palsy. I really, really believe cannabis can help people with different disabilities. Cannabis is a new miracle drug. It really helps out a lot, and we are still finding out what else it can do. I believe cannabis needs to be legalized in Congress. I have no idea who this kid is, but it's an awesome story. One right after that, after attending UMass Amherst for 4 years, I saw everything that marijuana shouldn't be. I saw buds covered in mold in multiple dorm rooms and apartments. I saw people filling cartridges with stuff they barely knew. When cannabis became legal in Massachusetts, I started practicing my own growing with a legal 12-plant home grow. My fuel was that I wanted to create a product that resembles how the cannabis plant was intended to be, not grown for profit, but for quality meds, giving the plant its best possible chance of growing to its full potential. This practice helped me land a job at a facility in Rhode Island for medical marijuana cultivation. X number of years later, now pursuing a delivery-only license in Massachusetts under the Social Equity Program. I'm very confident that I will have a lifelong career with this plant, and my intention is not for profit, but for creating the most quality product available for people who need it. Man, doesn't that make you feel good for all the sweat equity you put into this cause down in Washington, right, Morgan?
Absolutely. Those are the stories I love hearing. I mean, that's what gets me up in the morning.
And we have the amazing is I got a lot of people telling their stories on our show that's in the weeds. And we're going to start putting them all together and sharing them on shows like the Green Rush Live, because this is one live show we do every week. So, Morgan, as always, thank you. The next time means that I believe is scheduled for the 3rd Friday in June, correct?
That's right.
Unless something breaks, and then you're always Appreciate that. Have a great weekend, Morgan Fox.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
And of course, now it's 4:20. It's time to listen to Shanty by Jonathan Edwards for reasons. We'll be back with more of the Green Rush, and we're going to be talking about staffing your cannabis company after this break.
With us.
Yeah, this is a tune that I wrote back in 1900. I've forgotten. We had a saying in our old band, one of my first bands in 1966 or so. What are you going to do tonight? Oh, just, like every other night, just going to lay around the shanty and put a good buzz on. Gonna sit down in the kitchen, fix me something good to eat. Make my head a little high, make the whole day complete. Gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. Pass it to me, baby, pass it to me slow. We'll take time out to smile a little before you let her go. We're gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. You're on something. Go ahead. Rick Brodsky, everybody. Nothing to do and there's always room for more. Fill it, light it, shut up and close that door, baby. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Take it, okay. Prohibition never works, it's time to realize it. It grows in my backyard, it's time to legalize it. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. I'm gonna sit down in my rented car, I'm gonna jam it into drive. Gonna head on out and play at WSCA with Sean, I'm glad I'm alive. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Every night and day, we're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on.
Hi, I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media. And when I started Pro Cannabis Media 2 years ago, I wanted to make sure the cannabis industry had a professional outlet to share their stories in their own words. Now, since it all started with my podcast In the Weeds 3 years ago, I've done over 250 interviews. I've met some incredible people with a shared passion for this amazing plant. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard the line, cannabis has saved my life, Cannabis has changed my life. Well, now it's your turn. We want to give you a chance to tell your own story. It doesn't even need to be related to the medicinal power of this incredible plant. Just to give you a little incentive, we will pick 5 stories to share on our live Green Rush show on Fridays at 4 p.m. Eastern. If we share your story, you automatically get one of our t-shirts with that closing line I use all the time, "It's a whole new world of weed." But as the legendary Billy Mays used to say, that's not all. One of those finalists will win one of these really cool full-story cannabis storage units. It's a great way to store your cannabis in their food-grade aluminum containers. It's award-winning, child-proof, smell-proof, and has a solid contemporary design. It's a $220 value, but you can win one if we pick your story and feature it on our show. Yes, we will pick one of those 5 finalists, and they will receive this $220 value absolutely free. Now, we ask you to keep your story to under 90 seconds on video and less than 500 words in text. So come out of the cannabis closet and tell us your story, and you could win with yourstory.com. Just go on to procannabismedia.com and sign up today. You might even join us on one of our shows.
And we're back
Look at that, David. Take over, buddy. What's the name of the show, David?
with the Green Rush every Friday with Jimmy Young and me, David Rabinovitz, his trusty co-host. We're going to kick things off here. We got a couple of great guests. We're going to talk about staffing, how you find good people, how you keep good people, and how you take your staff and keep them trained in this industry. Jimmy?
We have two professionals from HR, the human resources world, if you will. One is Scott Newman. He's the business development manager for AdaptiveHR. And Karen Golden from HR, it's HR Consulting. And she's on the phone with us. And we appreciate both you taking some time out of your Friday afternoons to join us to talk about HR and staffing. First of all, let's start with Scott. Scott, how awesome is it to be part of an industry that is projected to hire more people this year than they have in the past? And more importantly, every year it keeps going up exponentially. There's so many opportunities out there to find good people and give them an opportunity to get into this industry. That's a good thing, isn't it?
It's a great thing. First of all, guys, thanks for having me on the show. Happy to be here. Happy to be chatting with you both and with Karen. But yeah, I mean the cannabis industry, I think just the buzzword it's booming because the amount of job creation, the amount of businesses that are opening here locally in our state of Massachusetts, but around the country, and whatever your political beliefs, it's creating jobs. And those companies, and especially in the small and mid-size, most of these clients aren't the huge, it's not the AT&Ts of the world. It's the small and mid-sized companies that are creating jobs, hiring employees, and building their companies. And that's really what's driving, I think, the bulk of the cannabis operators going. And there's a huge need in all levels of business and employees.
There you go. Karen, can you actually have an idea of how many employees an average dispensary actually offers? And I'll throw in the fact that let's pretend that dispensary is also a vertical. So they have a grow facility, they have a manufacturing facility, and then they have a retail operation too. Is there an average for amount of employees in that?
Yeah, now, when you throw in vertically integrated, it makes it, that much more complicated. But if everything's in the same facility, you can have less employees because employees can switch between departments. So if they're vertically integrated, they have a grow, they have production, and a dispensary. It can be based on the size of the grow. It can be anywhere from 50 to 100 people, I maybe even 75 to 100, depending on the size of your dispensary as well, because your dispensary is normally about 25 to 35 employees. Your hours are long.
Mhm. But at least they're all passionate about it. I will say you must experience that when you talk to people. There's a drive for people that want to get into this business, and even recent college graduates are actually contacting me to see not that I'm going to hire anybody, but to actually see if I know anybody who's hiring in the cannabis industry. And obviously, if that happens, what's my next step? Do I point them in your direction to a staffing company, or where do I go?
Absolutely. So there are a lot of programs now in colleges and universities that are not necessarily geared towards cannabis, but towards cultivation and biochemistry.
Right.
I was just on a panel call with some soon-to-be graduates of Northeastern University that all want to get into cannabis. So their best bet is to contact people like myself, apply to ads online through companies' websites and staffing companies. Staffing companies are really growing in the cannabis industry, no pun intended. But that's a great way to apply through staffing agencies, and they're doing a lot of job fairs now. Staffing agencies where you can actually book your interview prior to the day. And I think that's really helpful.
Hey, I'm going to read a quote that I cut and pasted today. Don't ask me where I cut and pasted it from, but it's in regards to what we're talking about here. Apart from hiring and firing, there is applicant tracking, background checks, offer letters, time and attendance tracking, PTO policies, employee classifications, benefits, payroll deductions, the list goes on. Cannabis employers need to ensure all employee documentation is orderly and safe, and not just because it's federally required. Another example of the depth of what HR is all about, Scott, correct? I mean, it isn't just hiring and firing, right?
No, I think I think Karen and I both hear from our operators, a lot of times people don't realize when they get into a lot of the people who, what we see is these people who are operators are coming into it from a different industry. And maybe they might have had a lot of success in a different, in say in a marketing company or in the restaurant industry. And they think, oh, well, it's just cannabis. We're going to replicate it just with the green rush. But it's much different than that, because to your point, here, say example here in Massachusetts, the CCC has several very specific requirements that necessary. Every employee must have an agent card where the company has to pay money for that. There's specific background checks and very specific steps that need to be taken just to even get that employee hired. And then obviously to maintain, just to continue to make sure they have their licensing, they have to, Karen can go into all the details, but they have to continually to stay on top of all of these trends, both from the local, state, but also the federal agencies, and then be able to deliver them in a way to their employees so their employees understand what our requirements are for training. So the answer is yes, there's a lot that a small business owner has to be on top of. And it can be very challenging and time consuming.
Karen, I bet you have something to add to that.
I have so much to add to that. And Scott is completely right. And I think, and to add on to that, a lot of these licensees have never owned a business before or owned a business in Massachusetts before. And they're very, which is so important, focused on meeting the CCC regulations to get open, that they're not, focused as much on state and federal laws. And I think the most important advice I can give to anyone starting a cannabis business is get your policies, procedures, and your handbook completed before you hire your first employee, because setting expectations is the most important thing that you can do for your team, and also your mission, vision, and values, so that you're like creating a culture before everybody comes in. And not to plug Adaptive, but to plug AdaptiveHR, the great thing is they can upload all of these documents for your employee to review and acknowledge prior to them, even prior to their first day, so that we know they've signed the harassment policy, they've signed the code of conduct, and now we have the whistleblower policy. That's a new CCC reg that they have to sign off on. So there's just so many things that do need to be reviewed with employees legally, but also to teach them appropriate behavior and expectations for when they start.
David, you're checking the chat room. I know that's where your eyes always go, is seem to be checking out that chat room. Any action in there yet? Anybody want to tell us their story? That's the other thing I'm looking for.
No, we don't, not yet.
I do see some action, which is good. I do want to go back to an issue that happened in the Massachusetts space, the dispensary space, where it was a husband and wife situation. Okay. And I'm not going to get into the specific details, but I think you both know what I'm talking about. And because there was a relation to the employee, and the spouse of that employee was involved in a management dispute. You guys probably know a little bit more of the details. David, I know you know this story. Karen, you know what I'm talking about, don't you?
Yep. She got terminated.
It was a she who got terminated, correct? Because the guy was involved with another company. Am I right? Is that what it was?
Correct. It was like a conflict of interest, I guess.
Right. And, people don't realize how intertwined a lot of the cannabis community is right now, because even though it's growing fast, it's still a relatively small new industry. I believe it's something like 250,000 plus employees in the United States. Now more cannabis employees than electrical engineers. I remember that stat. As someone, Scott, like yourself, how do you go into an HR department or on a business call and explain to them why working with Adaptive is so important when they are trying to attract talent to their team?
Sure. Great question. I appreciate you asking me that, Jimmy.
That's what I'm here for.
There's not one single explanation or question. It's really just trying to discover, what a business owner wants to do. It's asking more questions than us telling them things. It's, really understanding what's the why of what their business is trying to do. Are they trying to create, as Karen said, a mission-based business? So that dictates then who's the type of people they want to hire. What is their growth goals? So when you start asking the bigger questions, what fires why did that person start that cannabis business? Probably more than, we all talk to business owners, not all of them or most of them, it's not just to make money. There's many businesses that are a lot easier to start than cannabis business. There's some other reason behind it. A lot of them have a relative who chose cannabis because it helped them medically, and they were just driven to do that. So if you can start tapping into understanding a business owner, why they're doing the business, what they're trying to accomplish, and then that allows you to understand who's the team you want to build out. Because the whole infrastructure, the core of your business is having the right infrastructure and then adding the right people to it. So once you understand that, then questions around payroll, HR, and benefits become easier to identify, Jimmy. To attracting talent. So a couple things is attracting talent. There's more and more cannabis businesses opening here in Massachusetts and around the country all the time. So we ask the business owners, what's going to make your business different than the 5 others that are opening up in the 10-mile radius? It's not just a discount on weed. That's great. And having a nice fancy shop. Are you taking care of their employees? What are you doing to train them effectively? What types of benefits are you going to offer that's going to take care of the employees holistically, financially, their health, their well-being, and minimizing their stress by giving them a great place to work in a path to succeed. So if you can do those things, you're going to make yourself as a cannabis business operator potentially more attractive and be more competitive. So I hope
And
that's
Karen, you mentioned something when I asked you about kind of the size of a typical dispensary. Um, we would call them in sports a utility player, someone who can do different things within the organization, whether that's social media or some retail or some trimming, whatever it is. This particular industry really does offer the candidate an opportunity to do a variety of different things, correct?
Absolutely. It's wonderful because if they're not happy in production and they want to move over to retail, it gives them the opportunity to grow and develop. And that's a great thing. And one thing I will add to AdaptiveHR and why to go with AdaptiveHR is the time and attendance program that is associated with AdaptiveHR allows an employee to punch out of production and punch into the dispensary, which is great for 280E purposes. And again, you know, if I lost my train of thought there, I apologize.
That's all right. It happens.
I
We were
completely
talking about
Happens all the time.
the
Oh.
day.
Friday afternoon.
It's Friday afternoon.
Oh, I don't keep it just on Fridays or just the afternoon. It comes in, it's the greatest idea in the world, and then woof, it's gone.
I just remembered, but just to let everybody know on the call, if you are having employees do that, they do need agent registration cards for both production and dispensary or, you know, cultivation. So they would need multiple agent registration cards to go back and forth.
Yeah,
But
and what's
we-
interesting about that, hang on a second, Dave, because I think
Yep.
I know where you're going with this. I'm amazed that one of the compliance regulations in this industry for dispensaries that have both medical and adult use, the same
Yep.
employee has to
Yep.
do 2 background checks. You have to do the same background check on the same person, but the fee is paid twice to the state. That's not, I don't think that's very fair to be honest, but it's in the rule book, right?
Yep.
Yeah. All right. I just thought I'd throw that out there.
So,
Go ahead, David.
so, Jimmy, we got a question in the chat.
Good.
Here's Paul's question. I'm working on transitioning my career into HR and working within the cannabis industry. Is there a cannabis-related certification or some experience required that companies are looking for entry-level people in HR?
In HR.
Yeah, that's a good
Who wants
question.
that one?
Karen, I think that obviously with your background.
I would say, so here's what I've observed. For most cannabis companies that are starting up, they're not hiring an HR person. They're hiring an HR consultant because they're not big enough right away. But when they do hire an HR person, maybe when they hit 100 employees or over, and some small companies do, they are looking for HR experience because they do need that, you know, expert there to help guide them through starting up a new business.
Yep.
Yep. And I'll add, that's a great question because I know there's a ton of people probably who are out there who want to get into this field coming from other backgrounds. And, you know, I can say is that for a lot of these companies, if you have certain areas of expertise, like maybe you, for instance, you know, you ran retail stores for years, but you never worked in cannabis, that's still an excellent person who could run your operation, who understands the of and tackling of running a retail operation. So those skills can be transferred. And I think the same thing can be done, you know, in Paul's scenario, or someone like Paul, who has experience managing people, knowing the ins and outs. Maybe he doesn't know cannabis, but some of those nuances can certainly be learned. And especially in some of the emerging states like a Michigan or Massachusetts, you know, people haven't been in the cannabis field for 20 years. That experience in the States just doesn't exist.
Unless you're from Humboldt County. And you know,
Well, if you're from
those are the kind of degrees that the that I think employers are actually looking for, to be honest with you, is to see where did this person who might be the head of my cultivation unit, where did they learn how to,
Yes.
how would, right? I mean,
Correct.
It's
No,
magic, it's a magic county.
The lead growers aren't going to be someone who just graduated.
Right.
That's clearly a different skill set. You know, you want to get someone who has some, you know, a lot of, ideally the cannabis experience coming from a different state, or has a lot of experience in agriculture and local cannabis. So I think there's, again, depending on, is it retail, is it cultivation, is it product manufacturing, or even transportation is obviously here in Massachusetts is new in delivery around the country. So I think it's being able to, again, take those skill sets and bring them into the companies.
How important is getting
Absolutely.
Cann, how important is getting a certificate course, even if it's online? And do employers now actually give you like a written test to see just how much knowledge you know about the cannabis plant?
So a certificate is great. However, I see a lot of employers who want to train people. However, I agree with Scott, you know, cultivation manager, lead cultivator, production manager, kitchen manager, all that. Usually they come from another state, or they went to another state for a couple of years, trained, and came back. But they like to teach people. So skills that are transferable, retail skills, production skills, agriculture, chemistry, stuff like that. I have yet to see, and I've worked with a lot of cannabis companies, I have yet to see a written test. I have seen a lot of questions being asked for knowledge and behavioral interview questions, but I have yet to see a written test.
Okay, good. Do you remember a question? You could just throw it out to us and see if we can actually answer it.
Thought there was no
Me?
math involved here.
The difference between a
Yeah,
sativa
no math. No math.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's get back to training. Are you starting to see, you know, right now we've had, I believe it's something like 5 states that are now coming on board. The ballot question is passed. They're starting to form their regulatory bodies, or they are starting to look at licensure. And, you know, some states are a little bit further ahead than other states. You know, it took Massachusetts 2 years before the first adult use dispensary even opened, and for a number of different reasons. That being said, what is the I guess it would be the timeline for when the true industry launches? Like, for instance, New Jersey, they voted in adult use. They have, I think, something like just 17 medical dispensaries in New Jersey right now. Needless to say, that's a big market. I'm guessing there's a lot of money going and looking into New Jersey now, and looking to develop and get licenses and that sort of thing.
Money in the marijuana sector, Jimmy?
What's that?
Big money coming into the marijuana sector?
That's why they call it the green rush. This is the business
Oh,
of cannabis, David.
That's why it is. Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry. We kid because we can. The point, it was actually a pretty good question I was going for. What is the sales cycle? What's the hiring cycle? Is it a year? Is it 2 years? Is it 3 years? You know, Massachusetts, David, how many dispensaries? 4, something like that in Massachusetts?
Last I counted, it was about 125. But that was a few weeks ago.
Yeah, no, I think it's closer to 134, 35 now. That being said, that's 3 years in, and I don't even know if you count. I don't even know if you count 2020. But you know, business went on. Licenses were being given. Stores were being opened. People were being hired during the pandemic. Can you? Is it a year, 2 years? When do you really see the big employment boom in a new legal state? Is there a timeline? Which one of you wants to give me an idea on that one?
Well, I think if there was someone, if either Karen and I could accurately answer that question, we'd be on a lot more shows.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, that's the, you know, I don't think either of I have a crystal ball. We could certainly take a stab at it, but I mean, I'll just say this is the demand for New York, the demand for New Jersey to get those licenses is enormous. Just think of, New York's the financial capital of the world,
Right.
and at least of the US. And, the amount of money that wants to go in there, but they've also done some things like, they're making, and say in New Jersey, micro businesses.
Yep.
So you're not every single business coming in is going to be an MSO, which I think is a good thing. I think they're giving more opportunities to smaller businesses. So I think the key is going to be is when everybody is waiting. I was just having a conversation with a Colorado consultant earlier today that does a lot of writing of the applications, and everybody's waiting, Jimmy, to find out when the specifics of what the timeline is to get passed. So I guess the real short answer is I don't think either of us know, but I would probably say, it's probably going to be sometime in 2022 next year till we really start seeing some movement on both those states.
Right. And if we just use the metrics that you guys have come up with, that the, 50 to 100 employees for verticals, or maybe 25 for non-vertical dispensaries. You've gone from 2 dispensaries on November 20th, 2018 to 135 now. So you could do the math, needless to say, it's going up, which is good. But, it takes time. I mean, it's not going to be immediate, and Lord knows these college graduates that are coming out, they want that immediate gratification, don't they, in that 6-figure job?
Yeah.
I do want to make one comment though, is that I think one thing that a lot of people forget about when they talk about the hiring in the cannabis industry is all the ancillaries. Like, a lot of people, like, there's a huge opportunity, let's just say you're a college graduate, in that. And the thing is, maybe you're not sure maybe you want to go into the cannabis space. You're not exactly sure, but the thing is, maybe you're an accountant. Well, guess what? There's a huge amount of need for CPAs to support the accounting industry. Just because you're not plant touching doesn't mean that you can't have a tremendous amount of passion and support, of a CPA, or
Right.
if you were an attorney, or again, all of those ancillary businesses. So I think sometimes when people are looking to get into the space, it doesn't mean that you necessarily have to be a grower or a bud tender, but you can do a ton of different things. And I think that's where there's a huge opportunity for anyone who wants to, even if they don't know anything about the space.
Karen, what's the turnover in the cannabis space for employees right now? I mean, it's such a early stage. Are we seeing a lot of turnover?
Oh, it's, for startups, when they first start, I would say it's, typical to restaurants. It's high. For dispensaries, if, I'm typical HR geek, if you create the right culture from the beginning, the turnover is much lower. And that's just how I feel. But it's, over 100% in the first year.
Wow.
Let's go down a quick detour, because I think you just made a great comment there. Talk a little bit about how does one create a culture, and that term gets bantered about a lot, and I think some people overuse it. And explain, what do you mean by a good culture?
That's such a great question. And in the regs that just came out, part of 2022 curriculum is, besides the RVT training, they have said that another part of your 8 hours of required training can be implicit bias and diversity training. So what I mean by creating the right culture is making sure that your company has a mission, a vision, and values, and that they're not just, posted up on a wall or in your handbook, that you're living by those values. Every licensee has to have a positive impact plan and a diversity plan. Make your employees part of that, and that creates such a great culture where everybody gets along and it's all inclusive, and you're respectful of each other from the beginning. Because if you don't start off that way from the beginning, it can fall to pieces. And I've seen it happen. So, does that answer your question? What culture means?
Yeah.
I think that
Oh,
that does a
and
good
just-
job.
And more importantly,
just to
David
let you
asked a good
know-
question. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, he did.
Oh,
And
gosh.
I just want to add, I am currently working on an implicit bias and diversity course with Stoker Compliance, and it's going to be offered online in a couple months.
That's great. Again, another opportunity for expertise and to, put your shingle out on the internet, if you will, and share your experience. How do people get in touch with you, Cann?
My company name is Hollis HR. H is in hotel. OLLIS HR, and that's my website as well.
Terrific. And Scott, how do people find out about AdaptiveHR?
Sure. They can just go to our website, adaptivehr.net. They can email me personally if they have questions. They can certainly find me on LinkedIn, but I'm simply S Newman, Newman at adaptivehr.net. But even if there's anybody out there who just has a question and wants to learn, I love talking about the industry, and happy to make any connections and open up my network to anyone who would like to learn.
Well, that's awesome for both of you. And again, a shameless plug here for Pro Cannabis Media, because we are rolling out this storytelling contest, asking people to share their cannabis stories. Some of these stories that I've had told to me on the various shows that I've done over the last 2.5 years are incredible. Cannabis has saved my life. Cannabis has changed my life. I got off opioids. It helped my seizures. I mean, a lot of medicinal qualities to this plant have impacted thousands of people's lives. I mean,
Unbelievable. Yeah,
it is. And you guys have heard them too, I'm guessing, right? And another reason why you're finding talent in this industry, because the passion is there. People want to get into the industry because of the impact it's had on their lives. Is that accurate?
That is 100%. I mean, I would say to a T, everyone, you talk to any of the clients that Cann have or I have, or business owners, and again, like I said, it comes back to, why are you opening this business? And it's not just to make money. It's because they want to, whether it came from a social justice piece of it, that's truly important to a lot of people in this industry, to, just creating entrepreneurship in their family. Maybe some of them had families who were incarcerated because of the business. And now I just spoke to someone recently that their family member came out and now they're partnering and they're growing a business.
Fantastic.
Or it's medicinal. So there's so many different reasons. Or, hey, you know what? They were just intrigued by the industry and they don't know anything about cannabis, but they were awesome at accounting, and now they have a thriving accounting practice. So there's a lot of opportunities and great stories that you guys are helping to share with everyone.
Just go on to Pro Cannabis Media and tell your story. Cann, anything last about that?
I will say it is so wonderful interviewing candidates and hearing their stories and why they want to get into cannabis. And a lot of the times the stories are because of ill family members that they wanted to get off opioids, and how they got them off opioids because of cannabis. And their stories are just so moving. And these candidates are so passionate about cannabis. The stories are wonderful.
Well, we're hoping we get a whole bunch of them on our website. I hope people that are in the chat room who might be watching this take the time, go on to the website, fill out the form, and just tell us your story. We could read it on the show. We could add you into our show. You could win a T-shirt. You could win a storage device. I mean, there's a lot of motivation to get you to do it. And I think a lot of people actually like telling their story. So like the shirt says, tell your story. Scott and Cann, thank you so much for joining us, getting the show off to a great start. We're going to have another panel of staffing people coming in here in the next hour. Don't go away. Green Rush Live continues after this.
Great. Thanks, guys.
Hi, I'm Ben Schauer, New England rep for Salient Video Management Systems. Let me tell you what makes us different in the security space. We're your trusted advisors for all your security needs. I know how complicated the regulations are in cannabis, and working with Salient Systems will be the polar opposite of that. I give free consultations and will walk you through every step of the process so that you can get what you need at the price you can afford. We're robust, we're simple and scalable. We're Salient Systems, your solutions to all your security needs. Please contact me at the information below, and I'm looking forward to being your trusted advisor.
Hi, I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media. And you know, when I started Pro Cannabis Media 2 years ago, I wanted to make sure the cannabis industry had a professional outlet to share their stories in their own words. Now, since it all started with my podcast In the Weeds 3 years ago, I've done over 250 interviews. I've met some incredible people with a shared passion for this amazing plant. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard the line, "Cannabis has saved my life. Cannabis has changed my life." Well, now it's your turn. We want to give you a chance to tell your own story. It doesn't even need to be related to the medicinal power of this incredible plant. Just to give you a little incentive, we will pick 5 stories to share on our live Green Rush show on Fridays at 4 p.m. Eastern. If we share your story, you automatically get one of our t-shirts with that closing line I use all the time, "It's a whole new world of weed." But as the legendary Billy Mays used to say, that's not all. One of those finalists will win one of these really cool full-story cannabis storage units. It's a great way to store your cannabis in their food-grade aluminum containers. It's award-winning, child-proof, smell-proof, and has a solid contemporary design. It's a $220 value, but you can win one if we pick your story and feature it on our show. Yes, we will pick one of those 5 finalists, and they will receive this $220 value absolutely free. Now, we ask you to keep your story to under 90 seconds on video and less than 500 words in text. So come out of the cannabis closet and tell us your story, and you could win with yourstory.com. Just go on to procannabismedia.com and sign up today. You might even join us on one of our shows. On a Friday afternoon here from Pro Cannabis Media, I'm Jimmy Young, and I'm always joined on Friday by my trusted friend and sidekick and buddy,
David Rabinovitz.
That's you. Good job,
That's
David.
that's my one line. I can now go back to sleep.
No, don't, because you asked the best question in the last half hour. So there's a lot of pressure now. I have a tough act to follow. I want to welcome in 3 women from the staffing world. Danielle Schumacher from the THC Staffing Group, Karen Meshkov from Flower Hire, Michelle Whitmore from H2 Talent. I am going to be a little biased. I'm going to call on my old friend Karen Meshkov first, because Flower Hire, run by David Belsky, right?
Indeed.
Has been a guest on this show.
Yeah.
They've teamed up with Leafwire and Peter Vogel. It's amazing to me, Karen, that we met 2.5 years ago at a cannabis show, and here we are live on the internet talking about cannabis, kind of entrenched in our comfort zones of where we want to be. Tell us about what's going on at Flower Hire, and great to see you again.
It's great to see you too, Jimmy. So wow, what a whirlwind this last year has been, right? I mean, I think for Flower Hire and for everybody who's on the recruiting and staffing side, the cannabis is essential. The cannabis is illegal to the cannabis is essential has been just a huge shift for us. Especially, and this is, interesting. I think I actually am based here on the East Coast. My Flower Hire team, our headquarters is out on the West Coast, and that's where we started our business in 2017 and did a majority of our hires until last year. So in March 2020, when things shut down and cannabis businesses were deemed essential, that really was the beginning of what we are still living in now, which is a huge, huge surge in consumer demand, which of course drives talent demand, right? I mean, we need people behind the scenes doing all of this work in a safe, compliant, efficient way. And cannabis operators have really been pressed to continue to scale at an incredibly rapid rate. So like all of a sudden, we have as much business from companies here on the East Coast as we did on the West Coast. And then you've got Michigan right there in the middle with their booming recreational market. So like, it's been amazing. The last 12 months, we talk about cannabis dog years. The last 12 months for me have felt like a decade, in a good way, way. So thanks for asking.
And then the other side of it is it's also been the longest year in our lives,
100%. It has felt really long, and it was a scary moment for all sorts of reasons. But certainly here in cannabis and on the staffing side, it's been quite exciting to see the ramp up.
And we, from a personal perspective here, it's actually worked out great. David and I used to have to be in the studio together all the time. Now, we're not, which, I think he probably prefers hanging out in his house with his nice little virtual background. Danielle, let's talk to you about the effects of the pandemic on the staffing universe in cannabis. What has been your experience over the last year?
Sure. So THC Staffing Group was founded in 2014 after 10 years in the industry. So I've been doing some form of this work for almost 20 years now. And during the pandemic, really just started working more specifically on what we've always really wanted to be focused on, which is a pipeline for formerly incarcerated people. And there's been momentum building around that, but I know that the racial justice movement has really helped that along. And during COVID, even though, yes, cannabis is essential and there's lots of hiring going on, there was also a lot of layoffs and acquisitions and mergers. So in my opinion, a lot of the growth that we see is really turnover. And it's not so much my focus as far as the volume. So we've been more focused on strategic partnerships and building that pipeline. We are a mission-driven company. Our mission is to build a diverse and inclusive cannabis industry by prioritizing sustainable employment and ownership for those most impacted by the war on drugs. So the increase in work for me in the last few years has been social equity licensing, which is moving slowly, and where I'm based in Illinois is just not happening at all. But there's a lot of work to be done around that while we're waiting, and also inclusion work for existing companies, the over 80% white-owned companies in the space, who some of them really do want to start figuring out how they can diversify.
That's good news, and a great job on that elevator pitch mission statement. That was perfect. It was very well done. Michelle, tell me a little bit about the impact of the pandemic on your experience in the HR staffing world.
I would say that in some respects, our experience mirrors that of my two industry colleagues here. For our, I think we're one of the earlier entrants, or the later entrants rather, to the industry. We've only been around for about 3 years now, and our focus is really on managerial and executive search. So while we did become an essential business, and I think that really paved the way for a lot of those hourly and seasonal positions to keep the lights on, from our experience, decisions were being, pended, for lack of a better way to put it, throughout the pandemic, as people, tried to figure out, and companies tried to figure out, how they were going to move forward in this space. So, our business definitely slowed. We still kept everything together. I'm really pleased to see, as of January 1 here, that seems to be no longer the case. And what I'm seeing now is expansion, scale, expansion, more of it. Give us more people. We're going into new markets, and it's a really exciting time, and great to be able to kind of come out the backside of this.
Absolutely. David, I know you're keeping an eye on that chat room. If you've got anything in there, like, I'm going to guess that question, and I'm going to go right back to Michelle for this, because I heard the word executive. We actually had an interview with a financial law expert named Ashley Elsner from Artery Pay. And we talked a little bit about the issues in the cannabis businesses that you've got, as she said, you've got people that understand the cannabis plant. And then you've got the people that understand business, but don't understand the cannabis plant. And I'm guessing more at the executive level, you find that is true. Is that accurate? And how do we get those two people together to work together in a company, or is that your job? Michelle, I'm throwing it right back to you.
A little bit of both, right?
Yeah, okay.
That's okay. Yeah, I would say that that's, really a group effort. You are absolutely correct, especially in the more executive, level candidates. There's a lot of transferable skills, right? Cannabis has the same corporate positions that every other industry, has as it relates to HR, finance function. They may look a little bit different. And, a lot of the companies that we're working with are more that smaller mid-size. And so there's going to be a lot of people wearing multiple hats as well. But there's, there's some commonalities to people who can make that transition and really be successful, right? It's going to be those folks that, really just love to build programs and processes. They love the fast pace and the constant iteration of a startup, right? So, gosh, and maybe most importantly, the comfort level in making decisions and hitting play on a strategy without knowing whether that's the right thing to start off with or try, right? And you can just really get a sense of the kind of person that that kind of environment really speaks to. You can see how they've used that in the past, and really anyone with that really solid sense of best practices is typically able to translate that well and have that same kind of best practice, adapting it to make it add value in a brand new environment.
Danielle, you seemed to have perhaps the most experience. I heard 20 years. That's just amazing to me when I heard that. It's like, wow, she's been in the cannabis business for 20 years. That's just mind-boggling to me. Anyway, that being said, how has the candidate or the talent changed in that 20-year period for you?
Oh, yeah. It's continuing to change. Anytime a state legalizes, we receive an influx of resumes from that area. And as when you started to see the shift from medical to adult use, there was a huge shift. People who were interested in it, maybe even had some informal experience, but weren't, I guess, brave enough to actually think about switching to cannabis as a career. So as it's going legal for adults, then it's more acceptable, more mainstream. So just a high volume of applicants and from every walk of life. Really, that's one thing that has kept me really interested in cannabis in general, is that it brings together all kinds of people and that pretty much all work experience is relevant. Now, when you're talking about management and executive level, you have to have some hard skills and hopefully some exposure to cannabis, but just such a wide range of people to choose from. So my candidate pools are a nice cross section of people from different places, different backgrounds, and who have multiple skill sets, people who've had 2 or 3 different careers, and cannabis employers tend to be a little more open-minded to when you see that someone's moved around to different fields. It can be a benefit actually that it shows they're well-rounded and adaptable. So I would say also people from, like rural areas, sometimes somebody will have to come to town to use internet to correspond with me and willing to relocate. So it's in some ways there's so many more people to choose from, but at the same time, like there's still some really highly competitive roles.
Karen, over to you. How has it changed over the last few years as far as the diversity candidates that you're getting? Are you seeing a wide cross section, and has that made it any easier? And also, what is I think it was Danielle who mentioned, the plant itself is about bringing people together. It always has been. There's a socialization aspect to this plant, and it's also reflected in the industry, isn't it?
That's a big question, Jimmy.
That's what I do. I ask the big ones. David asks the good ones.
I'm like, hold on. Let's
go ahead. Just talk for a few minutes.
There's a lot of questions in there.
Go ahead.
All right, so let me back up a little bit because I wanna jump on and just reiterate both of what my colleagues said, which is that when we're looking at corporate folks who have a corporate background and how do they come over and maybe they don't know about, maybe they haven't imbibed the plant, maybe they don't have. I will say this, at Flower Hire we have something we call the cannabis DNA, and we really look for that in candidates. And what we're looking for is like, no, you don't have to be somebody who has smoked this plant since you were in your teens, although there are many people for whom that is true, right? People who have been devotees of this plant, they understand the history, yeah, and they are in every cross section of this industry are people who have known about the power of this plant for many, many years, have been involved in the gray and legacy markets. Are deeply connected and maybe have had to keep all of that part of their lives under wraps because they've had a more traditional career. And now you see this fascinating, experience where I get on the phone with someone and they look super buttoned up and their LinkedIn profile is like, all corporate, and then I start to talk to them and like find out, they've been growing their own plants for years and, they're a real devotee. And now it's this incredible experience for them to be able to come out and tell their story. And frequently when we're putting together a biography for a client to say, do you want to talk with this candidate? We'll tell that story, right? Because everybody has a cannabis story, or we believe they should have a cannabis story, right? If you are going to come into this industry, you don't have to be someone who is that person. It's okay if you are new to this, if CBD is sort of the route you've taken, or maybe you have a relative who is being healed, but we do look for some sense of a connection and an understanding to the greater movement, to the sacrifices that have been made to get us to the point where we are. For people, frankly, who just have green dollar signs in their eyes, we do not think that those folks are the ones who are going to be the leaders that we need for this next iteration of this industry. And so we really look for people who have some sense of a connection to the plant. And I hope that answers that. And I hope it's okay if I just sort of hold on the diversity conversation, just because that's a really deep, and a different conversation.
It's fine. And it's certainly something we can be talking about for an hour if we need
For sure. Because
I think we all understand that how important it is in this industry to do that. So if you're a college graduate, okay, you're over 21 and you have some experience with the plant, because after all, even if you didn't study it in college, most people do get exposed to it, perhaps even for the first time during their college years. They want to come out, they want to get into the business. Piece of advice for each one of those people, and I bet each one of you has a different perspective on it. Danielle, I'm going to start with you, if you don't mind me calling on you. What's a piece of advice? How would you suggest people get prepared to prepare themselves to apply for a job in the cannabis industry?
For college graduates, I would say stay humble, because your college degree doesn't necessarily qualify you, even though, as I said earlier, all skills are transferable, but a college degree doesn't translate in the same way it does to other fields, although it can be helpful, of course, depending on the role and the employer. But there has to be more to your application than that. And also, I guess this is 2 tips. While it is important that you have a connection to cannabis, to keep that minimal, like don't make your whole cover letter about that. Don't spend 10 minutes of the first 10 minutes that you get in an interview about that, because people who work full-time in the industry have to hear a lot of those long, detailed stories. So I'd say, really think it through and focus, what is your connection to this work? Why are you applying to cannabis? Keep that as concise as possible, and think about beyond your college degree, or what other parts of your college life are relevant, and work experience. Really highlight work experience.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Michelle.
Yeah, I really like a lot of what Danielle add to it, and really encourage people, whether they're college grads or making a career transition, to network, get involved, educate yourself. There's so many local chapters of organizations all across the country, both on professional level and student level, that you'll meet people in all areas of cannabis. Getting to know them outside of a formal job application is a great way to get your foot in the door or get that referral that just might make all the difference in the whole wide world, right? This industry, one of my favorite things about it is it's just full of people that want to share information, share knowledge, share their excitement about the industry itself, and in particular, the plant. Take advantage of that every chance you get.
Right. And Karen, you were talking about coming out of the cannabis closet. You know, that's our theme, right? I mean, I have heard this for years now, and I just said, you know what, we're going to embrace this. We got a company that's got a storage unit called Story, STORI. When I saw the email, I was like, I've got this amazing promotion for you. I don't even care what your product is. It's a cool product, which is great. But the point was, you know, tell us your story with a Y and win your story with an I. So coming out of the cannabis closet, Karen, so incredible stories. We've all heard them now, right? Does anything surprise you anymore?
Anything surprise me? I mean, yeah, I get surprised all the time by people's stories. I mean, it's very interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think what I wanted to say about the cannabis story, and I really appreciated what you said, Danielle, like about that when you're younger, it's important, and if you're not at an executive level, particularly, I think it's really important that you really do limit, because it's true. I have heard that from hiring managers on the dispensary level, right? They have people who come in and they, oh my God, I just love your shatter and I love your, you know, and it's like, that's wonderful. But like what you want from a consumer is like different than what you want from, you know, your leadership, right? And your staff. So like to keep it professional and to really, you know, try to highlight again, transferable skills, things you've learned in school, internships you might've had, you know, ways that you can plug in. I think for younger folks, like my advice is about, and I heard somebody else gave me this advice that I'm resharing, that what you do or what you majored in, and this is true for older folks as well, it might not fit exactly into the roles that are available in the cannabis industry right now. So it's like, I'll have people call and say like, well, I do, you know, like development work, or I do, you know, sort of like something like I'm a creative director. It's like, well, there are not many cannabis companies that are big enough right now to have creative directors, but you could definitely be a graphic designer. You could definitely be a marketing director for a startup, because really all cannabis companies are startup except for the handful who've kind of made it to the enterprise level. So I think like people kind of understanding that exactly what they did in the other world might quite not fit in yet. And you sort of have to look and poke around and ask questions and see where you could fit in. And and be amenable to that, right? And be flexible to that. So hope it's okay. I answered that question.
No, actually, and now you get me thinking about exactly what we're doing and what I'm about to roll out here,
Awesome.
Which is kind of combining the experience I had as a broadcaster for 30 years now in the cannabis space. I do want to ask about oral communication skills, because my first company was Young Broadcasters of America back in 2008, and I taught young kids how to talk instead of text. Now it's 13 odd years later or so, 15 odd years or whatever it is. It's a while now. And I still see a lack of ability to actually talk instead of text, to be comfortable. And what I've also seen over the last year is because we're all on Zoom, people are actually starting to be more comfortable talking to each other face to face, even if it is through a camera or a phone. So let's talk about oral communication skills in candidates. And I'm guessing at the executive level, you still see some challenges for that. And I'm going to start with Michelle, because she keeps telling me about her executive level. Go ahead. Do they know how to talk? Do they know how to talk? That's what I'd like to know.
That's all very true. Oral communication skills are no less important today than they were 20 years ago, despite, I would say that communication as a whole has probably grown. It's not that oral communication takes a backseat to other forms. It's that now we've added text, we've added instant messaging, we've added all of these different platforms that we use in different ways to keep our teams. I would say that was even reshaped over this last 12 months, as we all moved very, very suddenly to a work from home environment. But we still have a lot of clients, especially in those executive level positions, that will ask for a presentation or ask for some kind of white paper and to be able to present on a topic. So, that's still very, very relevant as our speaker opportunities, to go out and get your company name in front of folks, at seminars, at trade shows, at conferences. And, thank heaven that'll be opening up, I think, a little more here soon. Looking forward to that.
We went to our first one last Saturday. Cann had a little beanstalk event in Portland, Maine, my old stomping grounds up there. And there was such a cathartic release to be in that room, even though we're all wearing our masks, even though, the booths are separated, it wasn't that crowded, which was comfortable, to be honest with you. But it was just great to see people and share the passion, because if there's one common thread in this industry is there's a tremendous amount of passion for this plant. I don't care what level, what job you're in. Danielle, what about communication skills? Are you finding, and is there a generational thing there? Because I'll admit it, I might be far more comfortable talking on the phone than I am texting. I just am. It's part of who I am, my age, the whole 9 yards. I don't like social media in general, and yet I understand how important it is to help building a business, especially in this space. So can you talk a little bit about the challenges and communication skills among candidates that you've seen?
Yeah, it's such an interesting question. Part of my major was linguistics, and when you were reflecting on this, I had a flashback to an overhead presentation that I gave in my senior year of college, because texting had just come out.
Wait a second, hang on. An overhead projector. Is that
yes.
what
And I had the slides were about like examples of text messaging and this like acronym, this trend of acronyms. And when that first started happening, I thought, oh no, people are not going to be communicating in full sentences. Kids aren't going to learn how to spell full words and stuff like that. And I still, I really struggle with keeping up with acronyms. So it is, I guess there are some patterns that are generational, but I'm always amazed at candidates in their 20s who can really use email communication really well, and are very responsive and thorough. And then that translates pretty well to a conversation. They're very comfortable with something like Zoom. And so while they might not think we should be leaving voicemails for each other, they might do voice memos, so So I'm thinking of like, not only in interviews, but in the workplace. I think the interview process is a really, it's a reflection of what the person's going to be like in the workplace as far as communication. Although the main difference is in the interview process, people are way more nervous. So I do always give them a benefit of the doubt. One thing I will say that I think the younger generations really excel at is generally more thoughtful use of language and more awareness of gendered language, language that could be triggering or appropriating. And I think that's really important in this industry. And so I think that we have to have intergenerational teams so that we can be learning from each other. Because even myself, I look to people in their 20s for guidance, and it's always changing. I learned just a few days ago for my presentation I was preparing, don't say Latin X. We're moving to Latin A. And I don't know if I'm saying that quite right. So I think it's important to keep up on that no matter your age.
By the way, I have like no idea what that means. Okay, and I will admit it.
Danielle's here.
Yeah, that's right, Danielle. Can you interpret a little Latin A and X? What exactly does that refer to? Does anybody know? Help me, please.
Oh, instead of Latina or Latino, which is gendered. So to move away from gender, and like in my
Gen X and Gen Y and all, I kind of get it. I get it.
No, it's not that, Jimmy.
Okay, please help me.
Yeah, it's okay. Just Danielle, tell him.
Sure. Okay. Really quick tutorial. Have you heard this acronym BIPOC?
No.
Okay. Yeah. So
all right, let's start there.
Yeah, BIPOC. You've heard POC, people referring to people of color. Okay. So last year, all of a sudden, it became kind of mainstream to say BIPOC, which is not a lot of people who would fall into the category of BIPOC don't even think we should be using that. So it's an example of it's hard to keep up, but I think the intention is there. So you can tell what the intention is there. So if, for instance, if I said Latinx, which is referring to Latina and Latino people, but also non-binary people. And now we're moving away from Latinx to a different pronunciation of it, which is Latin A, I think. Okay. And so I guess point is, I don't have to always know exactly what's the quote unquote correct or right thing to say, but that you can see I'm making an effort and that, it's imperfect. And yeah, we learn from each other. And I think this, even though I guess, I'm not really speaking about cannabis when I'm talking about this, but it's so related because that's where the whole industry is really, it's where it's from and where it's continuing to go, that we have to get better at this kind of thing. And language is so important.
Yeah, that's great. We're going to take a break. I want to kind of set up my video director here so he's prepared. That we're going to take a break here for a second, and I'm going to just give you one more little anecdote about my personal career. We started a training studio for young kids to talk to each other, young broadcasters of America, and one of the games that we did, one of the little skits that we had was teaching oldies text, and they would give me the acronym, right, and I'd guess. Now I got to tell you, I swear I don't embellish this at all because I'm not afraid of laughing at myself. I swear, LOL, right? I thought was lots of love because it was the thing I only got from my kid, right? It was LOL. Every time he say, hey, LOL, I'm like, oh, lots of love. I love that from my kid. Then I find out it's laugh out loud. And of course, now I've been using it forever. All right, we're going to take a break, come back on the other side with more talk with our staffing group and our staffing show. And David is going to take over for the rest of the show. Okay. So he's got a couple of minutes now to get ready for this. I know he can handle it. We'll be back with more.
All right.
So I think there's one very important difference between me and most of my team members and other cannabis accounting firms, especially outsourced cannabis accounting firms. With a lot of the other firms, you're going to find bookkeepers or folks that were accountants for their entire career, but they were junior accountants. I've spent most of my career alongside CFOs at public companies with thousands of employees, public companies. So much of my career wasn't spent in the debits and credits. It was spent with the CFO, CEO, COO of large public companies, working on strategy, working on planning and big initiatives, working on projects such as mergers and integrations. So that high level experience, along with being able to do the debits and credits and having members of my team that also have fairly senior experience and also members of the team that are junior and can do the bookkeeping at a little bit lower cost than some of the people with the experience, gives our clients a much broader depth of experience than a lot of the other firms where you're hiring someone that is just a bookkeeper and can't help with the strategy side of it, or someone that's been an executive for a long time and can only help with the strategy but can't help with the hands-on.
Hi, I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media. And when I started Pro Cannabis Media 2 years ago, I wanted to make sure the cannabis industry had a professional outlet to share their stories in their own words. Now, since it all started with my podcast In the Weeds 3 years ago, I've done over 250 interviews. I've met some incredible people with a shared passion for this amazing plant. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard the line, cannabis has saved my life, cannabis has changed my life. Well, now it's your turn. We want to give you a chance to tell your own story. It doesn't even need to be related to the medicinal power of this incredible plant. Just to give you a little incentive, we will pick 5 stories to share on our live Green Rush show on Fridays at 4 p.m. Eastern. If we share your story, you automatically get one of our t-shirts with that closing line I use all the time, "It's a whole new world of weed." But as the legendary Billy Mays used to say, that's not all. One of those finalists will win one of these really cool full-story cannabis storage units. It's a great way to store your cannabis in their food-grade aluminum containers. It's award-winning, child-proof, smell-proof, and has a solid contemporary design. It's a $220 value, but you can win one if we pick your story and feature it on our show. Yes, we will pick one of those 5 finalists, and they will receive this $220 value absolutely free. Now, we ask you to keep your story to under 90 seconds on video and less than 500 words in text. So come out of the cannabis closet and tell us your story, and you could win with yourstory.com. Just go on to procannabismedia.com and sign up today. You might even join us on one of our shows.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Friday afternoon Green Rush. I'm David Rabinovitz, joined by Jimmy Young, and we've got a great panel of guests. We're talking about staffing, how to get a job in this industry, and how to keep it. So let's start with a few questions about. I think we talked a little bit about the backgrounds, but if you don't know anything about this business, but you want to be in it, what should you be doing?
Ask one of them, David.
I'm waiting to see which one of them wants to jump forward and grab it.
No. It's much easier if you ask them. Trust me.
Okay, Michelle, what do you think?
You know, being an executive search, I'm really hoping that the candidates who come to H2 looking for connections and networking opportunities aren't completely brand new, or that they've done their homework before they started. We do help facilitate that education. We've got a lot of resources available. There's so many online, things that you can go and read through. It really gets overwhelming. So we maintain a list of reading materials that are a really great place to start, as well as, a compilation of links that we've found to be really useful as it relates to someone's overall cannabis education. There's also starting to be more formal resources available, college certificate programs, tracks of study within agriculture and, chemical sciences. And then, H2 specifically, we maintain a partnership with Green Flower Media and have often taken advantage of their online courses and recommended their certificate programs to clients who want to augment their onboarding programs or deliver specialized training to newer employees.
And by the way, I'm going to give Max Simon credit because that's where I went when I first got my medical card in 2013 to learn about the business.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
that was a long time ago. We all know that, and they've come a long way since. And are now, I believe, in like 8 or 9 accredited universities too. All right, David, go ahead. You want to ask somebody else the same question? Go ahead.
Gee, Jimmy. This happens every week. First he tells me.
I have something to say about this.
I can't wait till we get back in the same studio. Okay,
I'll kill him. So, Danielle, what are you seeing as the most common positions that you're filling?
Okay. Most common, let's see. I work with a lot of compliance managers. So different kinds of legal work. Sometimes it's lawyers, sometimes it's not. Let's see. Ancillary, really looking at Ancillary, because that's where my interest comes into play, where you don't have to pass background checks and get badged. So people with a criminal record can work in the ancillary services. Let's see, I know that, a big trend for the last few years is consumer packaged goods. So a lot of my clients look for instance, Pepsi. There's certain companies, Pepsi, Enterprise, companies where we know that there's robust training and the kind of company culture that translates well and is helpful. And then for what we do with THC staffing, finally, thankfully, there's been a big demand. Some of the most common types of positions I've been filling over the last year are through different kinds of workforce development programs and pipelines for formerly incarcerated people. So there's a growing demand for this, and it could be a range of positions, but basically just be more creative about different kinds of people and how they can contribute to a team. So really the whole supply chain and all kinds of ancillary businesses, it's pretty endless.
So Danielle, I'm gonna give you a follow-up, which is if you were giving a crash course to employers about hiring former inmates, what would you tell them? What are the challenges? What should they be looking for? What have you seen?
Sure. So I did a workshop on this last night. It's called Fair Chance Hiring, and companies can pay for a personalized workshop through a reentry group called Root and Rebound. It's the only group I know that's specifically doing this kind of training for the cannabis industry, because doing fair chance hiring in general is different than doing it for cannabis, because cannabis, there's all of the background checks, the badging, plant touching is a limitation. So let's see, the short version is really to rethink things, really reimagine how you see people when you're looking at a resume, to see them holistically, and to also think about the background check. What are you looking for and why? So if there's a legal requirement that's, you have to do, that's one thing. But if you're taking it further than that, that tends to be discriminatory and a waste of resources, especially when you look at what are the job functions that you need this person to do. Are they going into somebody's home? Okay, probably not. If they're going to be with a team in a public place, to be more open-minded, that people can change, and that people sometimes were incarcerated for something they didn't do, or for something that is now legal that the owner of your company is making money off of, right? So to just reimagine the whole process and how you see the person and fit them into the puzzle that is your team.
Great. I was just looking at the Root and Rebound website. They've got a pretty big organization.
Lots of programs, but yeah, it's the Fair Chance Hiring workshops, and maybe we'll have time later. I'm partnered with Cureleaf right now, and through Illinois Equity Staffing, we're doing, the goal is to hire 200 people who have either been incarcerated or with a criminal record that has prevented them from passing common background checks, and to get creative to find ways that they can work across the supply chain or for ancillary partners of Cureleaf.
Got it. Now, do each of the three of you place executive level talent in the cannabis sector? Karen?
Well, Danielle definitely does.
Danielle definitely does.
Call on Karen, David.
I was waiting to see if she was nodding her head up and down, Jimmy.
We do.
You do.
That's our lane as well in the staffing and HR side of cannabis. So Flower Hire is an executive search and placement firm. We've placed about 500 people into the industry, in MSOs, SSOs, brands, and on the ancillary side. We placed into 15 states, which we're very excited about. And we really see ourselves as, in terms of the kinds of roles that we staff, our lens is whatever a cannabis company needs from a strategic standpoint in order to scale efficiently and properly. And that's what we're seeing right now. So The type of roles that we were staffing on the director, VP, C-suite, and board level a couple of years ago are different than the types of roles we're seeing now, because companies have more money and they are scaling more rapidly. So like, and because of that, the roles that we're seeing, like we need directors and VPs of operations, right? We need people coming from manufacturing, retail, CPG, industries where, they know how to move hundreds of thousands of units, right? Like the scale of everything is just getting so much bigger so quickly that's where we're really looking to bring in those leaders from these adjacent industries, because we don't have that experience of doing that at that scale in cannabis, right? Yep. You can be the best grower in the world, but like we've never grown weed at scale, as a country, as a world, frankly. So it's a really interesting time, and we're being asked to staff different level roles than we were a year ago, for sure.
And how many of these senior type roles, how many of them are roles where you have to know the plant versus you need to have a certain skill or you need to know business?
Well, certainly, there's nobody more important in the cannabis business than the grower, and everybody knows that. I mean, this industry is about the plant, and if you don't have incredibly strong cultivators at the helm, you cannot do what you need to do. So certainly, like cultivate, and then I'll put a caveat in that we do bring leaders from big, big agriculture. Right? Big horticulture. I mean, companies like Driscoll's, Trump's companies like Sunkist, right? If there are growers from those types of companies that, again, know how to scale over 100,000 square foot grow, they can be taught cannabis. Now, they're not going to come in and be the lead grower, right? You need someone who understands the plant and understands the terpenes and has seen several harvests and knows what the repercussions of having the light here is versus having the light here, and having the humidity be X versus Y. Like that is just a deep level of expertise and knowledge that you simply can't supplant. Right? Like it needs to be, you need to have a very experienced head grower. And then other positions like sales, operations, even sometimes marketing, that is a skill set we find that's a little more transferable, right? That somebody from an adjacent industry can come in, and as Michelle was saying, with some education from a green flower media, with 2 or 3 or 4 months of really putting themselves to the task, can come up to speed fairly quickly.
Michelle,
Wait, I'm going to interrupt you, David, because I want to follow up. I can't. What was it? 15 minutes? I didn't say anything. The director of cultivation versus the director of operations. Now, you said, Karen, that the cultivator is, you got to start with the plant. Who's making more money in that organization, the operation side or the cultivation side? And what is the pay scale difference between the two, if you don't mind me asking? And Danielle, I'm going to guess that you have this too. So the other two, you guys could prepare, but I'm going on a limb thinking that I meant Michelle, you probably know right off the hat, right?
Possibly.
And the range, it doesn't have to be specific. It can be a range.
Yeah, probably the way I would answer that is that there's, a lot of variability as it relates to pay. I would say that the size of the organization as a whole, the stage of their growth, the market that they're actually in, whether a company's offering, non-cash benefits such as equity and things along those lines really make a big difference. So I wouldn't be able to just put, a blanket, rule across that. But yes, the operations folks are really key and are trending, within H2 right now, as is the cultivational leadership. Agree wholeheartedly that our more sophisticated clients and our larger clients are the ones looking for that, large agriculture experience, because those are the people who, even though they don't know the cannabis plant specifically, they know how to grow, they know how to, operate at the scale at which these cannabis companies want to get to. And so, they're the folks who are able to come in and again, it's those transferable best practices that are going to be really key in making, that particular, leadership role successful.
Because we're not federally legal, let me just jump in here. We actually do not have tracked salary data. So there really is no way. I mean, like, to be sure, these are six-figure jobs, right? Across the board. If you're at a director level for a cannabis company, even in a startup phase, you're at a six-figure job. But in honestly, it is a challenge for those of us, I'm sure Michelle would agree with me, in this space, that there is so much variability in compensation, and we're actually not able to track it. There are a few organizations like Blue Fire, in cooperation with the NCIA, I believe, who did, there are a few comp surveys out there, and our competitor also in this space, our colleagues at Banks, published a salary report. So those things are available online for hiring companies to take a look at, but it all needs to be taken with a grain of salt, because as Michelle said, there's just so much variability. Until we have federal legality, we will not be able to track that data properly.
And Danielle, what have you seen over the 20 years you've been in this business as far as the growth of the salaries on those two, operations versus cultivation?
Yeah, well, first there was a big shift away from cash salaries and bonuses. I definitely was
big bags of weed.
Yeah,
right.
I was paid lots of, in cash. And,
take it out and trade. I get it.
Right. So, but I kind of, it's kind of similar in the sense that, like, there's the base salary, and then you have to really get into the details of what's in the benefits package, because that can make a huge difference. One of my model clients, like the company I point to as an example, is Howell's Tincture in Rhode Island and Massachusetts, which is actually a really small company, but they've been on the market for almost 10 years. And they have the best benefits. And so if you look at just the base salary, it looks low, but when you take into account all of the benefits, it's actually bumps it up. And so especially with cultivation, I see a lot of bonuses, equity, so it can make a big difference. And to be honest, some of the biggest companies, I'll just name one, Cresco, pays really low. And you would expect that a really big company would pay well, and they don't. So some of my clients who are small companies, or even social equity owned companies, pay better than the MSOs. So, it does range. I've seen companies try to pay like $70,000 for head of cultivation with no benefits or very few benefits. And that's a big company. So it's like, okay, I mean, you're not going to get very far with that. No offense to the individual person, but you get what you pay for. That, like, if you're seeing how low you can pay, it's going to cost you in the end. So I think companies, as far as to wrap up, like, the trend I'm seeing is companies are starting to figure that out now that the market's been around long enough, and there's so many states to compete with, and you have to really protect your talent and your trade secrets and all of that. They're finally figuring out that they have to pay more and offer a range of benefits. And like you said, start at six figures. I mean, most of the time I say we have to at least start at 100 for a base salary, but that's like the lowest point.
And what are you seeing? Are you seeing is equity, like options or that sort of thing, being an integral part of some of the offers when you get into the higher dollar people?
Absolutely.
How much equity, guys? Is it a pool of employee equity, or is it, non-diluted equity? I mean, there's all sorts of different ways to define equity, right?
RSUs, it's a range, Jimmy. It's really a range. And in terms of, I frequently get asked by cannabis executives when I'm talking with them. They'll say, well, how much equity, and this. We're early to this. I have only come across literally one company where they actually have sort of a policy in place for, like, VP level candidates get X percent of equity. Most of these companies are in the process of figuring this out, and because they're almost all cannabis companies are always fundraising, the amount of equity that they're willing to offer to a particular executive at a particular moment is going to be different than what they're willing to offer another executive at another historical moment. I recently placed a senior VP of marketing with a well-funded ancillary tech company. At the time that I placed her, they were pre-IPO. I'm now working on another senior level role for the same company. They are post-IPO, and based on where their stock price is now, they're not interested in offering the same level of equity. So these are complex, issues. And I frequently, when I talk to candidates, if that's what's at the top of their mind, I frequently will say, like, maybe let's give this another year or two, and wait till the industry develops a little bit more, because it's not a sure bet that you're going to get that equity. And frankly, we don't know where these companies are going to go. So there's no sure bet on what that equity is going to be valued at.
Or worth anything at any given time, right? Because
correct, right.
The values go, yeah.
However that business, exits, right, or changes hands, and there's so much M&A activity that we really don't know.
Get it. All right, we're going to wrap up for the most part here. I want to let each one of you tell the audience exactly how you can be found, if you'd like to be found, on LinkedIn or on the internet. So if people have any questions they want to follow up, they can find you. Cann, where can people find you?
Oh man, you can find me on LinkedIn, Jimmy. And if you're in cannabis and you're not on LinkedIn, come join us.
That's right. That's right. Well, LeafWire is the LinkedIn of weed. We understand that, right?
Absolutely. Big plug for Peter and LeafWire. Super important social network in cannabis, as well as LinkedIn proper, which really has done a great service to the cannabis industry, particularly when live events became a no-go. That particular social network has been just a lifeline.
Except for one thing, they will not allow this show on.
Oh no, I'm sorry, Jimmy. I apologize.
No,
it's okay.
I tried for 4 or 5 months, and I just gave up, and I said, you know what? It's on my website. Okay, come to Pro Cannabis Media and watch it live. That's, you know what? It's fine. I get it.
Wait a year and try again.
Yeah, that's
it may be about the timing, Jimmy. It's clearly not about the content. I mean, your
appreciate
content.
That. Certainly appreciate
absolutely.
Appreciate
so LinkedIn is really the best place, and of course flowerhire.com. We try to put everything up there. We're on Instagram as well, but I do tell business professionals, I just think LinkedIn is an invaluable place to be. I mean, and for young people, if you don't have any experience, I'm just like, make sure you're spending 5 or 10 or 20 minutes on LinkedIn every day. Reach out to people. People are so nice. They want to share. They want to share their experiences. They want to bring you in, especially women and BIPOC candidates. Like, hit me up. Get in my DMs. Let's have a conversation. We need more of you in this industry. Yes, I'll leave it there. Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
Of course, DM is direct message.
No, Jimmy.
Danielle, how can people find you?
Yeah, and I learn so much every time I do a panel, like learn from the interview questions and the other
oldies text. Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, I agree. LinkedIn is great. Just under my name or THC Staffing Group. You can find us on Instagram at THC Staffing, and then THCStaffingGroup.com. And real quick plug for one of the big projects I've been working on for the last year is with women of color in cannabis. We have a Canna Careers program that I don't have time to describe right now, but you can find it at woke.world, WOCC.world.
Like that. Way to go. We need all of us to work together on making the whole world one family at some point. And Michelle, go ahead. How can people find you?
Yeah, you can always find us online at h2talent.com, or all of us are on LinkedIn as well. Amazing platform, the only one that's, I think really been supportive of the cannabis industry, of mainstream platforms. And so, we like to give them lots of love.
Oh, okay. I'll give them a little love. I'm going to give them a little love because I'm on it every day, and we do post on it just so everybody knows, noontime on Fridays is when we run our first edition of our Weed Talk News, which is by far our most watched video. We had 12,000 views of last week's video. Very proud of that. About 100,000 over the last 90 days. So we're getting found, which is awesome. We tell people to like, share, and subscribe everything we do, please. And I think everybody echoes that as well. David, how can people find you if they want to find you?
Just come here every Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock, Jimmy. I'm stuck here until you release the chain.
That's true. However, I will say this, take the next week off, will you? Okay? You don't have to work next Friday. How's that?
You're a great guy.
You all could do the same thing. It's Friday before Memorial Day. I'm actually going to visit my son in North Carolina. I haven't seen him in quite a while, so I'm looking forward to that. But I want to say thank you to all the people, not just in this panel, but the Morgan Fox, and we had Scott Newman on earlier, and Karen Golden as well, and of course my staff. And a special thanks not only to Isabel Turner, who continues to do an amazing job of putting this all together every week, But to Dan French, the poor guy is running master control out of his bedroom. His computer decided to update and shut down on him, and he had to scramble and find a friend to go direct this show from a friend's house. And I just think that is above and beyond, certainly employee of the day, if not the year. So Dan French, shout out to you. Great job. Thank you very much. And for everybody here at Pro Cannabis Media, I'm Jimmy Young. Remember, Weed Talk News follows this. It's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly and tell us your story, will ya? Thanks for watching. See, except we're on tape next week. Okay, not live, but we'll have a show. See you later.
Thanks, everybody.
Coming up on Weed Talk News this week, all quiet on the federal cannabis front, but Alabama adds a medicinal program and Montana opens for adult use. Bribery, corruption, and fraud in cannabis. Why does it keep happening? We talk with our financial law expert, Ashley Elsner. And New England's been vaccinated, so the cannabis convention is back. And so is Weed Talk News for this week.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of Weed Talk News. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media. If you haven't checked out our Tell Us Your Cannabis Story contest yet, please go to procannabismedia.com and come out of the cannabis closet and tell us what your cannabis story is with this amazing plant. In the news this week, no movement on the federal legalization front, but plenty of action at the state level with Montana and Alabama governors moving forward with cannabis reform, while Louisiana and Minnesota hit a wall. We start our state-by-state roundup with New Jersey's Tiramisu Sargenti. It seems that this new legal state in Jersey is going through the same kind of NIMBY growing pains that Massachusetts went through in their first few years after voters voted in adult use. NIMBY, of course, stands for Not in My Backyard. Here's Tara's report.
I'm Tara Masu from Blazin' Bakery, and this is the New Jersey Report for Weed Talk News. Seems every day now, a new town in New Jersey is rapidly passing an ordinance to prohibit adult use cannabis sales. Now it is thought to be a result of the guidance issued by the New Jersey State League of Municipalities. The League of Municipalities is a voluntary organization authorized by state statute and has been operating since 1915. From the League website, their goal is to help communities do a better job of self-government through pooling information, resources, and brainpower. Unfortunately, that pool is squarely leading local government officials to pass opt-out ordinances banning adult use cannabis sales. This again is in stark contrast with the wishes of a large majority of New Jersey residents who voted 67% in support of legalization. Again, it received bipartisan support, passing in all of New Jersey's 565 townships except 3. The League website provides ban language by supplying a full opt-out ordinance template, which recommends a blanket ban prohibiting all 6 license types. The website also says they prioritize the opt-out language, which was released on March 2nd, but that they will be releasing more documents. However, nearly 3 months later, there is still no opt-in letter template. Township ordinances must be passed within 180 days of when the bill was signed, which falls on Sunday, August 22nd, and that puts us at just about the halfway point. So basically, it seems many municipalities are basing their decision on this misguided guidance. As a result, towns across the state are now scrambling to pass ordinances banning adult use cannabis sales, much to the detriment of their residents. This has been the New Jersey Report. I'm Tara Masu from Blazin' Bakery for Weed Talk News.
Montana Governor Greg Gianforte signed the adult use legalization bill this week after voters gave him the green light at the ballot box in November. The state sales tax will be set at 20% in comparison to the 5% tax for their medical program. Now, sales won't begin until January of next year. Regulation for both programs is moving from their Department of Public Health to the Department of Revenue. Another M state is Michigan, and that state is joining others with a ban on Delta-8 THC. Our Michigan Cannacaster is Rick Thompson. He has that story. Rick?
Well, thanks, Jimmy. This is Rick Thompson with the Michigan Report for Weed Talk News. On Tuesday, state lawmakers approved a package of bills requiring Delta-8 THC to be regulated by the Michigan Marijuana Regulatory Agency. The bills would cover Delta-8, but also any additional cannabinoids discovered in the future. The package received approval from the Michigan House Regulatory Reform Committee and moves on for a full vote of the House. The committee approved the bill package by unanimous vote. Just days prior to Tuesday's vote, the Colorado Health Department issued a rules interpretation determining Delta-8 THC derived from hemp has been outlawed in that state. That makes a dozen states with Delta-8 THC bans in place. Regulation or prohibition is expected soon in Illinois, North Dakota, and Oklahoma. Innovative Industrial Properties has executed another sale-leaseback purchase in Michigan, this time with multi-state operator Sozo. The $16 million exchange includes $10 million purchase price for the property and $6 million for improvements. Sozo now changes from being a property owner to a leasee, as Benzinga reports the deal is a long-term triple net lease. Innovative Industrial Properties now controls more than $200 million in property and improvements in the cannabis industry in Michigan alone, and some of those sale-leaseback deals come with annually inflating interest rates in 30-year terms. And that's it for the Michigan Report. I'm MICBD's Rick Thompson for Weed Talk News.
There's another southern state entering the medical marijuana world, and it's Alabama. Their Governor Kay Ivey signed a bill this week that is still one of the most restrictive regarding the types of products allowed to be ingested medicinally. Those banned products include all smokable products, flower, and vape concentrates. They are identifying, however, 12 conditions that will qualify you for a medical card. No such problem in Illinois, where they continue to set sales records. Here's Margot Vaselli, our Cannacaster in Illinois. Margot?
I'm Margot Vaselli from Margowana with this week's We Talk News Report from Illinois. The Illinois House Committee unanimously approved a bill designed to create more racial, gender, and ethnic diversity in the ownership of marijuana dispensaries. The vote on the House Bill 1443 would allow for 110 additional licenses to be awarded in the state of Illinois. Now it's off to the full House to be voted on as early as the end of this week. If approved by the House, then the bill would go to the Senate for consideration and then potentially to Pritzker's desk for a full signature. Despite the holdup of all these brand new licenses being offered, the state is now confident that we will sell over $1 billion in sales before the end of this year. That's the Illinois Report. I'm Margot Vaselli from We Talk News.
Here in Massachusetts, one of the worst cases of bribery, extortion, and fraud involve a former mayor of Fall River, Jaceel Correa. Cannabis companies in Massachusetts have to secure host agreements from the towns where they want to set up their businesses. And bribery is sometimes the easiest way to get that done on the local level. Now, it's easy, but it's illegal. And Correa was found guilty of 21 of 24 counts against him and is now facing up to 20 years in jail. He will be sentenced in September of this year. For the rest of the stories in the Bay State, here's our new Massachusetts Cannacaster, Ron Marshalsea.
Hello, I'm Ron Marshalsea, and I am here with the Massachusetts Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. MedMen Enterprises out of California raised $10 million that will help launch new stores in Boston and San Francisco. The company plans to open its location in Boston's Fenway neighborhood in late summer or early fall, and the two San Francisco locations are expected to open in the fall. MedMen is trying to reposition the company's narrative from, quote, one of turnaround to one of growth, end quote, said MedMen CEO Tom Lynch in a news release. Some scientists aren't sure why certain people don't get high from edibles, and they are calling it being ediblocked. People with this issue seem to have an immunity to edibles, and while cannabis doctors and researchers don't deny this immunity exists, they can't for sure say why. Dr. Stacy Gruber, the director of the Marijuana Investigations for Neuroscientific Discovery Programs at McLean Hospital, notes that it's not just about what and how much you're using, but also how you yourself are wired. It has something to do with a specific liver enzyme. But the bottom line is, some people have a more active metabolism that causes them to be edablocked. And finally, the Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission approved a new guidance on Thursday that will allow retail cannabis stores to purchase and then sell consumer-ready hemp products within the next few weeks. Products like hemp seed oil, clothes, as well as anything else made with hemp fiber will be eligible under this new guidance. However, any hemp food products containing CBD or non-food products containing CBD that have not been approved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration will not be allowed. That's this week's Massachusetts Cannabis Report. For Weed Talk News, I'm Ron Marshalsea.
It seems every week you have some movement towards cannabis reform, but you also find cannabis companies who continue to cut corners or just flat out break the law. The Department of Justice indicted 2 people this week for running a Ponzi scheme that involved a cattle trade company and a Colorado-based cannabis company. Mark Ray owned the Universal Herbs LLC in Colorado, and all 3 of these people are facing fraud charges where they took over $650 million from investors over 2 years. Now, just in case you aren't familiar with the term Ponzi scheme, here's our financial law expert Ashley Elsner from Artery Pay to explain.
What typically happens in a Ponzi scheme is there's an investment, like an investment fund, and you have investors that have paid into that fund, and the fund manager lies about the performance to entice new investors into it. And actually, because the investments are not in fact doing what they say it does, they end up paying out other investors using the new investor money. So basically you end up with a death spiral.
I then asked Ashley why it seems cannabis companies continue to be put under a microscope when it comes to any kind of business dealings.
You've got 2 different types of people in the cannabis industry. You have people who are really great cannabists, right? They're wonderful cannabists, and they have perhaps a more limited business background, right? And then you have the people who come from a very strong business background, but are less familiar with, best practices on the agricultural side, or best practices with respect to the product, or, how to create a truly fantastic cannabis experience. And what we really need in the industry is pairing these 2 types of entrepreneurs up.
Another state that's moving towards legalization is Connecticut. And this week, advocates for cannabis reform in that state met with their governor, Ned Lamont. They talked about what a legal market in Connecticut should look like. A recent poll in Connecticut by Sacred Heart University shows that 64% of adults in Connecticut favor legalization of cannabis. Next up in our state-by-state roundup is Vermont. Here's Vermont's green nurse, our own Cannacaster, Jessie Lynn Dolan. Jessie Lynn?
Thanks, Jimmy. I'm Jessie Lynn Dolan from Nurse Grown Organics and Vermont Cannabis Nurses, and this is the Weed Talk News Vermont Report. The newly formed Cannabis Control Board will be holding its first public meeting on May 27th. Information is available on their brand new website with a virtual link for the public to join. They plan to start weekly meetings for the board members starting next week, plan to have the advisory board appointed within the next few weeks, and are still interviewing for the executive director position. Cannabis Control Board Commissioner James Pepper attended yesterday's meeting with the Marijuana for Symptom Relief Oversight Committee. This committee consists of dispensary-appointed patients tasked to report to the governor annual recommendations and needs for medical cannabis patients. participants. With the medical program being folded into the new adult use market, this committee will be revamped to better represent the current needs of both caregivers and cultivators moving forward. Vermontawana is hosting the Vermont cannabis community's first social gathering of 2021, a plant and seed swap on Saturday, May 29th in Irisburg. It'll be a full day of legal cannabis genetics exchange and networking with enthusiastic cannabis cultivators and community participants. Tickets have been sold out for months. That's the Vermont Report for Weed Talk News. I'm Vermont's cannabis nurse, Jessie Lynn Dolan.
In case you haven't noticed, the weather in California continues to be as wacky as the tobacco they grow in Humboldt County. Historic drought conditions will again play a factor in the threat of wildfires in that state. Last year, over 4 million acres were burned, and the conditions in place in that state now are even worse this year than they were last year. In the meantime, all quiet on the federal legalization front in Washington, D.C. That's where we find Vote Pro podcast Phil Adams with our D.C. report.
Hi, this is Phil Adams from Vote Pro Podcast, here with the Weed Talk News D.C. report. Senate Finance Committee Chairman Ron Wyden of Oregon says the cannabis industry should be represented by U.S. trade officials once marijuana is federally legalized. At an event sponsored by the National Cannabis Roundtable and Leafly, Wyden said that the U.S. should be looking ahead to a time when the cannabis industry is normalized and trade discussions are conducted by trade officials. Wyden also voiced his support for reforming the portion of the tax code known as Section 280E, which prohibits state legal cannabis businesses from claiming the same business tax deductions and credits that are available to other industries. Wyden said, quote, "I think 280E needs to go, and I'm determined to get that done." On another front, Wyden is also joining two of his Senate colleagues to bring consumable CBD products out from what he calls a, quote, regulatory gray zone. While the Food and Drug Administration continues to slow walk regulations on CBD and other consumable hemp derivatives, Wyden, along with Jeff Merkley, junior senator from Oregon, and Republican Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, have introduced the Hemp Access and Consumer Safety Act. The legislation would exempt hemp, cannabidiol, and other substances containing hemp-derived ingredients from certain restrictions that have blocked the marketing of legal hemp products. Hemp and its derivatives, including CBD, were made legal under the 2018 Farm Bill. The Drug Enforcement Administration announced last week that it will begin approving applications for cannabis growers to become federally authorized to cultivate the plant for research. Currently, the University of Mississippi is the only legal research source for cannabis. Though the DEA hasn't indicated how many new growers will be authorized, it did mention that officials expect to see more applications approved. Back in 2016, the DEA announced that it would begin accepting new applications, and more than 30 companies and universities applied. To date, none of them has received a response from the DEA. That's the news from inside the Beltway for this week. I'm Phil Adams from Vote Pro Podcast.
And finally, with over 70% of the population in New England vaccinated against COVID, the Cannabis Convention is back. NCIA, Mark Shepard's New England Cannabis Convention Company, had its first face-to-face show in 14 months in Portland, Maine on Saturday the 15th. It was called Beanstalk, and it's the first of 6 events on the NCIA calendar in 2021. And after all that time off, no one's more happy to be back in business.
As you know, Jimmy, it's been a crazy 16 months or so. So, yeah, to be back, to see all the old friends in the exhibitor legs, to see the attendees coming in enthusiastically today, I mean, it's fantastic. Yeah.
Great. It's huge for the consumer, and it's huge for the exhibitors being able to communicate face-to-face and showcase their products and express the emotion and passion behind what they're doing.
I'll take it any day. It's a pleasant change. Really nice to be back around real folks.
How exciting is it to actually be at a face-to-face cannabis event again?
I forgot what it felt like. It's amazing. And I think we're going to obviously have a lot more of this coming up. So cheers to that.
You know, you can take the girl out of Humboldt County and put her in Maine, but that California culture is really tough to leave behind. That's Weed Talk News for this week. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly, and don't forget to log on to our website, procannabismedia.com, and tell us your cannabis story. You could win a great prize, and you could even be featured on one of our shows. See you next week. Weed Talk and In the Weeds are two productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
Hi, I'm Ben Shower, New England rep for Salient Video Management Systems. Let me tell you what makes us different in the security space. We're your trusted advisors for all your security needs. I know how complicated the regulations are in cannabis, and working with Salient Systems will be the polar opposite of that. I give free consultations and will walk you through every step of the process so that you can get what you need at the price you can afford. We're robust, we're simple and scalable. We're Salient Systems, your solutions to all your security needs. Please contact me at the information below, and I'm looking forward to being your trusted advisor.
Pro Cannabis Media programming is available live and on demand on our Facebook page at Pro Canna Media, on Instagram at Pro Cannabis Media, on LinkedIn also at Pro Cannabis Media, on YouTube and YouTube Live on Pro Cannabis Media, Twitter at Pro Canna Media, and on twitch.tv/Pro Cannabis Media. So like, share, and subscribe to all of our content, newsletters, and shows live or on demand.
We are